Hello, everybody, and welcome to day 2. I hope you've been having a great morning so far. We've been talking about promotion. We've been talking about the organization. We were just talking about data and Vibrate. It's really been a great 2 days so far. And I'm excited to get into a topic and a panel also that I think is maybe it's either near and dear to our hearts or it's near and dear to our curricula, right? It's amazing to think back. I mentioned yesterday that this was my 20th year in the classroom. And 20 years ago, it seems quaint now, when I was teaching, we were talking about how to get CDs on consignment deals into the local Best Buy, right? And then to fast forward and to see where all of us have come, where our classrooms have come, and also where our students are going is going to be really interesting. So we've got a panel today to sort of address that, and we're calling it Disruptive Potential. Because even though it seems like every day it's harder to keep up and there's another technological hurdle to jump over, the excitement of what can come from this, the excitement of distributive power, monetization, and everything else, it seems really exciting. So we're going to work through and introduce in conversation all of our panelists, and then hopefully have a really robust roundtable about where do we think we're going? Can we predict the future? Of course not, but we can see where today's excitement and today's developments might be taking us. I'm going to start today with Mike Warner, and I hope all of our attendees today know who Mike is, partly because Mike has wrote a book that has become one of my textbooks for navigating all of this. And it's a book called Work Hard, Playlist Hard. But Mike, we know that the topics therein go a lot deeper. You're coming at this as a musician. You're coming at this as a content creator, trying to get your work out there. And as you've explored this space, you've become a consultant, a data relations manager, an educator on LinkedIn. Can you talk to us briefly about what it was like as you started your musical career, trying to get your art out to the world?
Yeah, and talking about getting things out there, thank you for the shameless plug. What a great way to start. I certainly didn't expect that. I appreciate it. And if my voice starts to break a little, bear with me. I was in Nashville last week, and I may have brought something back with me, but I'm okay. But let's see. Putting aside the challenges of creating music and getting it to the completed stage of mixing and mastering, which takes a long time in itself to master the art of that, I'd say the biggest challenges were getting noticed and knowing if my music was actually reaching people, especially in the last 10 years. So that's when I started to look to tools. And obviously I'm part of the team at Chartmetric, but to name some others, I would also refer to Spot on Track and Spotify for Artists as an artist myself. Getting access to those tools, I thought they were only available to the labels. And so I knew exactly what to do with this information once I got access to it, and I could use it as leverage when marketing a new release. And then that's kind of what got me into this path with playlists. And then the other part that I'll just add is the other side of this with the last 10 years is I switched to creating my own playlists as an artist and using those as a tool. And when I first did that, I used a tool called Sounds Good, where I would synchronize those playlists across all DSPs for maximum reach so that people could listen whatever platform they used to listen to music. And then that was acquired by, I believe, Distribution. And now I use a platform called Soundies. So I just wanted to share a bit of the geeky side there with some of the tools that I've been using over the years that I've found helpful for those specific challenges as an artist.
Now, the fact that there's all these tools is a point of optimism, right? We really have access to a lot more, I think, than we ever imagined. We had a panel yesterday focusing on DSPs, and we learned a lot about the AMPed platform for Pandora, and we learned a lot about Spotify for Artists for Spotify. One of the challenges being, and I'm wondering how you navigate it as an artist, going back to that perspective of 20 years ago, or even a short moment ago, there were tools to help you, and you copywrote your music, and you signed up for a PRO. And if you knew about it, you also signed up for Sound Exchange. That was 3. registrations. But today, even just going through your book, the average artist could be forced or suggested to sign up for 40 things soon after that arduous process of making their music that they alluded to. So how do we vet which tools and when? And also, how have you kept up learning about the next tool that you could jump into and leverage for?
Sure. So there's a few parts in there that keeping up to date. I follow the engineers from all of these platforms, specifically if it's Spotify for artists, Apple Music on the artist team, Amazon. They have a public Twitter account. They have a public LinkedIn profile. You can follow them. They're going to be very happy to tell you as soon as they can when there's a new feature that's available, even if it's in beta, but they've opened it up. That's where I find out. And then what I like to do is, instead of just regurgitating a press release that 10 people have already done that day, I like to go in there and say, what does this really mean for an artist? I'll go and test it myself, and I'll record my screen if I'm allowed to, and I'll show everyone exactly how you can use this and what the benefits are and why it's worth 5 minutes of your time. As for the 40 different apps plus that you can sign up with, all of these products, they're not daily. You're not expected to log into these every day. You release 4 to 6 tracks per year. You don't need to log in any more than that. And when you do, most of the time it's that submission form. If you're organized, which sometimes I'm even not, you have a folder on your desktop with the artwork, an image of the artist that you need to update, an updated bio, an updated presser. Copy and paste. You've got it all there. No one is expecting you to be logging into these every day. It's not good for your mental health. It's not good for your creativity. And working at one of these platforms, I can tell you it's not healthy to spend all day focusing on those numbers. You need to check in from time to time and understand where you're at, but no one's expecting you to be on there all day, every day. You're a creator first and foremost.
Well, let's jump to our next guest today and start talking about the impact of these platforms. So you talked about the tools to get your music out there. Well, we now have the tools to really start to see what's happening with your music, but also not just with your own music, but what's happening globally. And Terry and the Vibrate team were just talking about ways that we can track and look at things globally. One of our guests today is Michelle Ewan. Michelle, am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yeah, thanks, Scott.
And you are a data analyst at Chartmetric. And where are you right now, just so the whole group knows?
Yeah, I'm in the Netherlands right now.
Well, thank you. Thank you for logging in. Thank you for joining us. What do you see as some of the core assets that today's data aggregators can bring to an artist or bring to a young creative who wants to be a professional in the music industry?
Yeah, I think, honestly, data has helped to open things up for a lot of artists and a lot of creators and people in general. You could say that it's opened things up too much, and sometimes you don't know where to go and what to look at. But I think having that information available is already a step further than we're at before, where you maybe had to rely on other people or didn't really know how to get into the business and the industry and try to figure out how to get your music out there, and also not just get it out there, but get it heard, which is probably the core problem today with all of the different artists and tracks that are released all the time. So I think that's been a huge help and has encouraged a lot more people to make music, which is why we have seen the creator economy grow so much.
Speaking of that growth, one of the themes that sort of emerged at this conference over the last couple of days is the notion of, hey, any release is probably a global release at this point. What are you seeing in terms of global engagement and global music consumption? I know you've blogged quite a bit analyzing the data from various territories and things like that. Is listenership up globally? Is there really this level of optimism that we can sort of embrace and take back to our students and young creators next fall?
Yeah, I do think so. Maybe I'm being overly optimistic, but I do think so because every release is a global release these days, and that as long as you're releasing on a digital platform, it can go anywhere that anyone has access to the internet. And that's basically worldwide. I think the sticking point is that every release is a global release, but not every release is marketed that way. And that is necessary to be heard. Again, because there are so many different tracks and things that, and I wouldn't say so much the attention span, which comes up a lot, where you spend 10 seconds looking at something before you scroll away. But I think it's more with the volume of content that is available. You need to do something to stand out, to be unique, to catch an ear or an eye. And so that's why there is the potential for every release to go global. But whether the listenership is that way, they're there for sure. I mean, I think we've seen, especially with more regional genres, K-pop, reggaeton. I think even Afrobeats now. Burna Boy was just at the Billboard Music Awards. He closed that out. It looked great. And so I think that's going to continue. But it's just on the marketing side, which is obviously still a huge part of the music business.
Absolutely. And you broached the next question that I wanted to ask you, which is probably in some ways unfair. But are we in a sort of post-genre world, right? I mean, we talk a lot about how 10 years ago, 20 years ago, you'd be limited to your regional access to musicians. You might be then subdivided into the category of music that you and your friends happen to listen to. And things like the iPod started breaking that, because you could have Metallica next to Mozart, next to Mos Def. Are we seeing that? Are we seeing jazz consumed globally, K-pop consumed globally, country consumed, listened to globally? Or is there still some really strong regional ties to be aware of?
I think there are still strong regional ties. There are genres that I think are more likely to go global, and there are genres that are more likely to stay local. And it's a combination, I think, of genres and also like the local culture. Like hip hop tends to be very regional. There are different kinds of hip hop all around the world, but in each part of the world, they prefer their local variety, if you will. But if you look at K-pop or just like kind of pop in general, that one's always been very global and kind of reaches all corners of the world. You could say there is less like censorship required because different parts of the world, depending on their culture as well, they might not be so open to some of the elements of hip hop, whereas pop might be cleaner in many senses. And so I think it's a combination of both that also helps certain genres go more global. But yeah, I think as a listener, genre list is great. As someone in the business, genre list is not so great, because then I don't know what to tag things as. And the categorization is really difficult, and trying to sort that out. I mean, even in Charmetric, we just updated the way that we categorize genres, and it's still a work in progress by a long way. But yeah, as a listener, for sure, I think that genre list is exciting. And it's definitely, you have artists who are crossing over in all senses.
Well, that's fantastic. I now sort of want to introduce our third guest today, who I'm sure many know. He's an educator and a member of this community, Ulf Osterley. Ulf, you've been sort of part of the phenomena that we're addressing today with this distributive power that's in front of us. And I remember it was a Vegas Music Summit, which was mentioned earlier today. You and I were chatting. I can't remember if it was 2019 or early 2020. And you were very nonchalantly like, I'm going to start playing with this TikTok thing. Well, only a couple of years later, your followers, your likes have absolutely exploded. And even within the last 48 hours, you actually put out a TikTok with a very specific ask, and you were just completely inundated with responses and amazingly opportunity after that. Could you briefly describe for us how you've sort of approached new technology as an academic, specifically TikTok, and where it's taken you?
Oh, absolutely. I've been teaching social media classes for the last 15 years. And so I've seen, platforms come and go and change, and features that users want. And one thing that I always sort of express to my classes is you have to experiment, you have to try, you have to be a part of the community to truly understand what's going on. And that was my, first 3 months of jumping on TikTok, is let me see what this is about and what you can do with the platform before really starting to dive in to create my own content. And over the last 2 years, the first, I think, 250,000 or so followers came in fits and starts. And now I've sort of hit that point where it's consistent growth, where, the content now is part of a storyline, and the users that are out there consuming my content have been a part of that storyline. So, the reference to the last 48 hours was with regards to an adaptive cycling, prosthesis or something that we could build low cost. I'm a cyclist and triathlete with one hand, and on those long rides, my arm without the hand gets pretty raw. So we were looking for something to solve that problem. And that turned into a video that in 24 hours hit over 4 million views. And, it now has several thousand comments from engineers, designers, TikTok users that are looking to help solve that solution. So that's turning into its own storyline. And along with that is, a story arc that will kind of last me through the summer with the races that I get to do, hopefully using some of the adaptive equipment that we build. So how does this tie back to music? That's, the big question here, because we're all looking for TikTok and that intersection with music. And, this is where the opportunity lies for artists, managers, label teams to reach out to people who do have that following and try to get some of your songs placed as the soundtrack for this. Over the last 60 days, I did the math, and I'm averaging about 1 million views a day for the last 60 days on my content. And for especially developing artists, that's a fantastic way to get your content into videos that might lead to additional duets or stitches that, it's a waterfalling effect and cascading, where now all of a sudden that one use could turn into 50 or 100 uses of your song. And then you can see the reaction on the data side.
Absolutely. Now, you alluded to a couple of things that I want to pick apart, especially leading into our next guest today. You mentioned that the excitement with what you've seen in TikTok is the storytelling, right? That there is a narrative arc through it, and you are creating content that is following you and following the story. And the content and the story is probably more powerful than the platform. If you've been teaching content creation for 15 years, we've seen MySpace come and go. We've seen Vine come and go. We've seen Facebook change and morph and go through all sorts of levels of engagement. What do you think and we're going to talk about staying power with our next guest. What do you think the staying power is with TikTok? And why do you think TikTok is having such a sustained and fervent engagement with folks? Even just here in Minnesota, we've had several artists explode solely from TikTok, right? That if you're going to have a rocket ship to some sort of mainstream success, it's either happening with TikTok or it's a more traditional slow growth thing. What have you found specifically about TikTok that makes it so compelling?
I think the TikTok user base is really dedicated to TikTok. That's part of it. There are people that are spending a lot of time just on TikTok, and they've left that time on YouTube. They left some of that time on Instagram, and they're replacing it with what we do see on TikTok. So that's part of it. I also think they've got the algorithm pretty great, and it's dialed in because, when you're scrolling, 2 to 5 minutes can turn into an hour pretty quickly as you just go through that feed. And you start to find out that you are following people and you're getting to know those people. I really like to draw the analogy with those who are creating content and think about this more so as you are the content as opposed to I've got to go create content. And I think in this, there's a great opportunity for musicians because especially when you're on tour or in the middle of recording, you have the ability to truly build that narrative and give everyone a peek behind the curtain of those day-to-day things that you might not find very interesting yourself as a musician, but the rest of the world finds fascinating. And from this, you can now start to monetize, whether it's, digital products, the NFTs and so on down the road, or selling more of your physical products from the studio. I mean, imagine the scrap piece of paper with lyrics written on it from the studio that you saw in those videos. Could that end up in your merch store? Somebody in your audience will really love to have that. So I think TikTok, with the users and the algorithm really is why things are sticking around. But with that being said, I think it's important to diversify as well, because platforms do come and go. If you only invest in one platform and that platform is purchased or folds or something, pushes people away from that, then, you've sort of lost.
This broaches one more question I have for you, though, and this is something that Mike alluded to at the very start of today, that, it's a challenge in and of itself to create your art, to share your story, to mine the depths of one's soul with a drum machine or a lyric sheet or a guitar and make art. You're also training to win races, and you're working hard to deliver in the classroom. Is there a challenge between being Ulf the athlete and then Ulf the content creator? I mean, that I know for myself that the act of keystrokes and mixing feels very different than the act of creating and playing an instrument. And it's a left brain, right brain thing. And you don't want to slow down the creative process with hey, wait a minute, I should turn on the camera and turn this thing into a TikTok video. How do you balance that for yourself, not letting your content sharing get in the way of some of your more primary goals?
For me, it's making both a priority. You have to go into this saying that I need to create content, but I also need to perform athletically or academically or whatever it may be. And with all of that, there's two paths you could take. One is you do it yourself. The other is you hire somebody to do it for you. And it's a question that I ask all of my students at least once during the semester on an exam. If you're building an artist team, who are your first two hires? If we read Passman, it's manager and it's lawyer. I might go with a content creator and a videographer. And so, there have been stories that videographers have done on me. There was a student here who just graduated who had followed me around for a little while and built out some short narratives about my triathlon career and interspersed the teaching side. And that won a White House press correspondence award as the top short film on athletics. So if I had the money to go and hire somebody, absolutely would do that. But I know the power of the platform. So me investing several hours a day in filming, in picking out the right music, and then engaging with that audience absolutely is important.
It makes all the sense in the world. Thank you, sir. I think as we're talking about TikTok, and you mentioned the lyric sheet or the other things that could be turned into merchandise, that is a very natural direction to go to our next guest, Baron Solomon. Baron, you've been in the startup world for some time now, and you've just started a company based in Nashville, Solo Music, and you're focused on NFTs, non-fungible tokens. And it's really hard to not have NFTs enter any multimedia industry conversation these days, because it's not just music, it's the NBA, it's so many different organizations, it's Coachella taking NFTs and turning them into tickets. Could you give us a quick, brief overview on what's an NFT? And like TikTok, despite last week's market fluctuation, why might this be a really exciting technology to stay?
Yeah, definitely. And first of all, thank you guys so much for having me on. Any chance to get to talk about NFTs and emerging technology, specifically to this panel today, I think it's really significant because just piggybacking off of the other three panelists, leveraging social media platforms, building an audience, appealing to an international crowd, and leveraging available tools to advance and impact your career. You combine all three of those things, and that really is at the intersection of what blockchain and NFTs is going to represent for the next wave of the music industry. I think, most importantly, is to get out of the way that, yes, there is a lot of junk in this space. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of nonsense. There's a lot of people, I make jokes all the time about buying pictures of monkeys for $300,000. And, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to too many people. And sometimes it doesn't even make sense to me, to be honest with you. And I built a platform that sells NFTs. But I think that we need to take away the mystery just a little bit and peek behind the curtain to what is really happening here. And so, to start out, just need you to understand what an NFT is. Something that is fungible is tradable one-to-one. So if I give you $1 and you give me $1, that's a fungible asset. We know we're getting the equal value. Something that's not fungible is something that has an assigned value to it. And that can represent a ticket stub for a concert that I went to when I was 12 years old. That may be worth infinitely more to me than it is to you because you weren't there, right? It can represent a contract. It's a living, breathing contract. We can actually make assets on the blockchain where royalties are paid out in real time to fans. We actually just sold NFTs for a touring artist right now that's giving away 10% of the royalty revenue for the album that he just released on Spotify. So there's a wide variety of things that an NFT can represent. But I think the most important thing to understand is that it's a digital asset that has value and can be exchanged and is permanently recorded on a blockchain. And so these digital assets, I think I might have frozen for a second there. I'm going to give it a beat. Sorry, I think my laptop froze up on me for a second there. We're back. So NFTs in general, represent digital tokens. They represent digital assets, exchangeable digital assets. And so for us, that can mean many different things. We have assets for, access to a fan club. We've got access to royalty streams. We've got access to physical goods like Ulf was talking about. So there's a wide variety, but I think the most important thing is to not overcomplicate it. If it's confusing, just chalk it up and move on and go try and find a project that makes sense to yourself, and dive in. I think that's the most important thing to start out with for sure.
Well, I'm focusing on your use of the word access, and that a token can be a mechanism for access to just about anything else. Yes, I will be using that term a lot more forcefully when I return to the classroom this fall, because that tells us that if NFTs could represent access to a venue, to a host of other content, then this isn't just the realm of high valuation cryptocurrency, Bored Ape type of things. It could be for just about any artist at any level.
Oh, 100%. And that is the whole next wave of what is coming in this industry, and blockchain is going to apply much more to your students than it does to people who really want to trade high value assets. My platform, not a shameless plug, just telling you what's coming, is making a no code self-service tool for building digital communities for musicians. And that's coming in the next 3 months. You don't have to know what an NFT is. You don't have to understand how it works. It's as simple as building a Facebook profile. And I think you look at what both have these huge social media followings. You have artists who are growing organically like never before. They're appealing to international audiences like never before. We live in a more genre-less world where if you can identify a core subset of fans, I think this technology is really going to allow a lot larger percentage of artists and musicians to make it, quote unquote, in this space. Now, what do I mean by that? I don't necessarily mean everybody's going to be a millionaire and is going to be, selling out Nissan Stadium. But what I do mean is that through the use of NFTs, you can build a really core group of fans that support you and want to see you succeed and really identify with your music. And now you have a way to monetize that internationally in a way that has not been presented before. So, it really is exciting for me to think about the next wave of creatives and how they're going to leverage this technology to gate content. Let's say that I am an artist who's currently touring and I'm out on stage and I want to go live for my NFT holders that night that can't be there in person. Well, if I own one of these NFTs, I get access to that live video stream. And if I don't, then I have to buy one to gain access. And so, it really is all about leveraging your art in a way that can give you a very core base of fans who really support your work and ultimately become a great sounding board for you as a musician.
Well, Baron, that makes all the sense in the world. And thank you for helping demystify some of the trends and technologies behind it. So now I want to ask a question to anyone who wants to jump in, looking at a world that's moving fast, looking at a world that I think we've all acknowledged is truly global today. To Michelle's point, whether or not you're actively leveraging that globality and going after marketing that, what do educators need to be thinking about technology? Is it specific platforms, or is it, like Ulf said, specific attitudes? We need to prepare young people to jump in and play and experiment and, swim with the current, if you will, to understand it. What are some of the things, the skills that you think young people need today in this big, broad, exciting world? Open for anyone who wants to jump in.
I'll jump in to start. I really think that as educators, we've got to be sure that our students are engaging and doing rather than just reading about and conceptualizing. So one of the assignments that I have in my social media class is to go viral. You have an assignment, you've got the entire semester to try it, and it can be on any platform, but you've got to have a video that has 1 million views to get the A on that assignment. A B is 100,000, a C is 10,000, 1,000 is a D, and under 1,000, you fail the assignment. And when you present that to students with a very small social media following, they get really intimidated until they find that great content will catch on. And so by doing it, you give them the opportunity to engage with what it's like for some of the artists that they'll work with later on.
Well, I think, Ulf, you've just brought up a question that at least has been in my head for a long time is, and we should probably have a me and meets on this, how do we all deal with students' individual social media properties, right? I think a lot of students might come into college thinking, well, this is my channel, this is my personal property, when we might be trying to say, no, this is actually a public and professional platform. Time to do less of the keg stands and maybe do more of the professionally facing types of things. It'd be interesting. How do you handle that with students? Do you recommend they all create new accounts based on what you're talking about, Ulf? Or do you turn around and say, hey, take your Instagram if you're an Instagrammer, take your Twitter if you're a Twitterer, and be platform agnostic? Are you platform agnostic, or do you say specifically jump into this platform?
I think when you look at what employers are looking for right now, they are looking at Instagram and TikTok as two high-level social platforms. And so, we make sure that the students are public with what they've got, go through and do a social audit. And you may want to pull some content down or private it, change those permissions, and, be ready, because when you're looking for proof of work, a lot of the employers will turn to social to see if, in fact, you can edit, you can tell a story, you are using songs, you're not violating copyright. There's a lot of things that go into that. So I would approach it really from day one with every student. I would have every student with their own website so that they've got a place for their portfolio of work, and then making sure that their social channels are providing content that's worthy of the industry they're going into. And that's just general advice for any industry.
Absolutely. And actually, I'm writing that down. Social audit. I'm going to use that again this fall. Back to the broader question at hand, everybody. Is it the skills for tomorrow, but the perspectives for tomorrow? What are some of your takeaways being in this space for the last several years? And maybe I just frame the question, what do you wish you had known when you were a little bit younger, before you would step foot in some of these spaces, that would encourage you or embolden you to jump in and play and experiment and hopefully move forward?
I can jump in on that really, really quickly, is to say that, emerging technology at first is always approached as something that is speculative and that is to be, greeted with caution. But I think if you look at musicians who really capitalized on the Web 2 wave of social engagement, right when Twitter first came out, Instagram, TikTok, all of these platforms, very normally it is the people who are willing to jump in first and experience and learn and grow alongside the platform that stand to leverage it the best. I know that there are probably a lot of educators, on this panel right now who are very much hoping that what I'm talking about is just a phase and that it's eventually going to go away because they don't necessarily understand it. But I just want to hit you with some, pretty cold hard facts really quickly. There were $30 billion invested into blockchain and crypto related, companies in 2021. The global market cap is over $3 trillion. DeFi platforms currently over $100 billion worth of assets. And even beyond that, and this is most significant, I think, is that globally, we don't normally recognize that technology has been accepted in mass until we get to 1 billion users. And we're only at 150 million on blockchain. I'm telling you, this technology is here to stay. You need to understand it. You need to understand at a bare minimum how it is going to impact your students, because it is about to drastically alter the way that the music industry on the business side specifically is conducted. And I'm being serious. We're having conversations with every label, every management company, every publishing company. I'm talking at the highest levels. They're all considering this. They're spinning up departments full of people who have no idea what they're talking about, but they're all running really hard, to try and figure this out as quickly as they can. So, my advice would be, do not view this as something that is a spectator sport. You have to get involved. You really need to understand this. And at a bare minimum, you need to be able to explain to, your students why it could become significant for them, as they begin this journey and really start to try and carve out a career for themselves.
Well, Baron, you brought up like 17 great points there. And one of them is that, I think we take for granted that musicians have always been on the leading edge of innovation. Right? If Stevie Wonder hadn't said, let me play with that clavinet, we wouldn't have had Superstition. If the Beatles hadn't been, said, well, oh, wait a minute, there's a 4-track in the other room. Well, let's go steal that in the middle of the night. Now we have 8 tracks. I mean, musicians have always been, whether it's with a drum machine or sampling or remixing or surround sound or video, it's all pretty inspiring. Now, Michelle, I'm wondering if we could get from you an aspect of data, because we've been talking a lot in this panel about putting things out there. What do young people need to know? What have been some of your big aha moments being on the other side and seeing that data and seeing that content go around the world? How do students need to address data and its impacts today?
I think knowing how to read it is important, because there are also so many platforms with data on it, and everyone's trying to figure out what it means. And at the end of the day, it is useful, but only if you have the knowledge to read and to understand and to apply, and to realize that the data doesn't exist in a vacuum. I think is one of the things that we try to get across the most, that the context is necessary. Might not seem like it sometimes, but we are all music nerds, and we do listen to the music in addition to looking at the numbers, and the charts and things like that. And so I think that's one thing. And the other thing is also, which might not even apply directly to us at Charmetric, because we look at like the streaming and social media data more often, but we also have metadata, and cleaning the metadata is such a pain. And trying to get that in line, I think also ties in with the NFT and the Web3 world, and trying to help that process be cleaner and be smoother, so that there aren't all sorts of things like royalties held up in some box somewhere, and trying to make the process smoother so that, there are more creators who can have more of a sustainable career. I think that's a really big thing. And metadata is not really something that's taught to anyone when they think about, oh, I want to be an artist. You think about making music, which is what you should be thinking about. And there is no kind of idea that you have to start looking at all these codes and all these platforms and the different ways to tag and enter things. And I think that can hold people up a lot. But if there is some kind of education on that from the beginning, I think that would be a big help.
That's a huge point. And I want to ask the MIA community something that we can answer over the next couple of months, whether or not this group is encouraging all of their students to get their own ISRC prefixes and doing all the metadata themselves from their home address, or whether it's just fine to let your digital distributor, your TuneCore, your CD Baby, your Symphonic handle the ISRC registration. That's one question I've always had that I'd love to have answered. Maybe I'll actually pose that to Mike if he wants to weigh in on that from the artist side. Is that something that every young person, young creator should own to solve some of the problems that Michelle is talking about? Or should we let our digital distributors solve that?
I feel like the more hands-on you are, the more you understand, the more you feel that you actually have ownership and control. To use maybe a less relevant example, with the second book, I ended up actually purchasing my own ISBN so I could register myself as a publisher, so that I got access to all the data, so that everything fed back to me. And I realized, I'll be honest, I haven't done this with my music in previous years. I've just said DistroKid, CD Baby, TuneCore. they'll register the ISBNs for me. And it's not that they're doing anything evil or deceptive. They're trying to help, because it does cost you money. There's a small price there to get set up to do this. I mean, that's how Derek Sivers first started CD Baby, by generating ISRCs and selling them. And it really escalated from there. So I would say, yeah, have control of as much as you can, even if it's just in the early stages, because it's going to help you to understand how it all works. And the amount of times that I've had artists that have said, oh, the data is incorrect, I don't know who to contact, I don't know who to reach out to. If they set that up themselves, that's on them.
A question for the whole group, as we wait for some audience questions to come in. Where do you think we're going? What are some of the really exciting, now Baron has spoken to some of that already today, things that he's excited about, but for everybody, what are you excited about in the future, and what can be some optimism that we can all be prepared to take back to our students? We're going to have a panel later today on mental health, and there's been lots of conversations from educators, at least in the first day of the summit. This has been a hard time for educators, professionals, and especially students who, college should be about socialization and, as you all suggested, trying things and getting hands deep in things. And we've been Zoom schooling for many of us. We've been behind masks. What are some of the things that we should be or can be optimistic about moving forward? Anybody?
I can step in here. I think we have to be optimistic and aware of where the creator economy is going, especially when it comes to full user-generated content and what the younger generations are engaging with. Variety had a report this past April. It was called The Future of Content. And in there, they sort of broke down the use of media by age group. And those 13 to 17, 56% of their media consumption was user-generated content, not major studios, film, television, music. The same with 18 to 24 was 53%. So as we continue and we see that trend where more than half of media consumption is created by users, that's a trend that I think we're going to continue to see and we should be aware of. I mean, that was one of the motivations for me to build out a class this fall. That's the business of content creators and influencers. Because if you understand that economy, those that go to school can really lean into monetizing their career via creators.
We're starting to have some questions come in, and we need to have a whole other panel unpacking that, right? I think the impacts of not having shared cultural totems or shared cultural moments, whether it's films, books, or national narratives or international narratives, that terrifies me. And I'm finding jokes in the classroom don't land anymore because no one has seen that episode of Seinfeld or whatever it is. So we'll have to come back to that. But there's a lot of questions coming in. One question, here's the first one from Mike. Mike, what are some of the key changes with streaming that you addressed from your first book that had to change within the second book?
World of playlists got very heavily saturated. And of course, I had already chosen the name and I had to stick with it. But in all seriousness, I mean, I've been saying this the whole time. A playlist is not a playlist cannot be your marketing plan. It's great to get on them, but there's a lot of different things you can do that will eventually land you on a playlist. It's the same as radio. It's social media, it's getting it to the right people, it's sending all those DMs, asking all those questions, filling out those forms. There's a number of different things that can lead to that. This time around, it was the first book basically just set out the very basics that you need to do. You want to get on a playlist, make your own. You want to get on other playlists, start doing playlist swaps. And then people were saying, what else can we do though? We've done this, we see the benefits. And that's where this time around, I went into all of the tools that they're providing from the DSPs, so there's tools that Spotify have what's called promo cards. They have a separate website, promocards.byspotify.com, where they create social media artwork for you. And it's already created. They include the link. Apple have their own milestone cards as well, where once again, they create the artwork for you. They even give you the text and a link, and you can even click a button, go straight in and post that to Twitter or Instagram, post it to your story. So there's a lot of these tools that are helping to do the things that not everyone enjoys doing, such as creating a social media post to announce a release, to announce an upcoming tour, things like that. So that's kind of the direction it's going. I know that people are feeling overwhelmed by all of these tools, but if you look at it the other way, they're actually helping you, saving you time, taking away some of that pain with things that you don't enjoy necessarily doing because you would rather be creating music.
That makes all the sense in the world. And one of the things I love about your book is the glossary that's at the end that helps, lay out some terms, list tools. And we've talked a lot about this at MIA. We might need to have some more resources available online so that educators can come in and, find a list, a clickable list of some of the tools that you're addressing. Here's a question for Baron that just came in, talking about prerequisite information. Educators are finding that there can be a disparity in students' knowledge of blockchain, crypto, and how this all works into the finance world. What do you feel like students need to know as you start to explain what an NFT is?
Mm-hmm. I think that the main thing that I would try to help people understand is that this is more direct control over your career, over the monetization of your content. All of the stuff that Ulf described of the behind the scenes stuff that you guys take for granted. And I say this as you guys, because although I'm an amateur musician, I have not been in the industry to the level that you guys have. I've been in technology most of my life. And so the idea of being in the studio, recording sessions, behind the scenes content, all these things that naturally, organically happen in the career and in the life cycle of a musician that previously have been unmonetizable, or you have needed to sort of give it away via a social media platform or something like that. You now have the ability to take these what you would consider to be unspectacular things and turn them into spectacular results. And what I mean by that is really super serving a very core set of your fans. Let's say you can use your TikTok as a teaser. Hey, check out what's happened in the studio today. If you want the rest, you have to be a member of my NFT digital community, right? Post the link, people get behind the scenes. So really what this is going to represent overall is more direct control over the economy of your career. And I think that ultimately is the objective for what the blockchain industry represents for music in general. It's just more control for artists, more power to the creator, putting the economy and the balance of power in the industry back into the hands of the people who create the art that we all love. And so that is what I would want people to understand above anything else.
How about one more point to you, Baron? Breaking down a definition of the blockchain, we've got a redundant, duplicated ledger. What's another way to simplify how to understand what the blockchain is? Because everything is built upon sort of that conceptual model, right?
Yeah, I would say an easy way to understand it is, permanent digital assets, right? Unchangeable, unmodifiable contracts. You guys were just talking about metadata, automation of metadata and automated royalty distributions are, going to live forever in this on-chain environment where we don't have to worry about third-party distributors collecting and sending money to, into people who've been creating and building in the space. I think it really is more of just this idea of digital permanence and an irrevocable system of truth in terms of who's owed what and, how you're supposed to receive that.
That makes perfect sense. And I like to think about it as, I still need to pay property taxes, yet this spring, instead of having your records located in one office, they're replicated on every computer on the network so that there's a redundant backup of proof, which really helps to measure that. Now, looking at complex things like this, a question from Michelle just came in, actually a two-parter. How much should coding be in the skill set of young professionals, do you think, today, Michelle? Because another educator asked a question as well that is, how do we balance an artist being an artist and then knowing when to maybe service out and pay somebody? Michelle, should coding be a bigger emphasis in industry curricula, do you think?
Don't go changing any curriculum because of anything I say here. But I think that there is a lot going on for artists anyways, without even introducing coding. And it is kind of a whole other skill set, and even a different side of the brain to have to focus on as well. I do get asked the question a lot of how to balance the creative side with the numbers and the data side and which one to pay more attention to. I would say without music, we don't have any of these numbers and data to look at. So, create your music first, create your content. That is what ultimately people are looking for and interested in. And then after, that's when we look at the numbers and evaluate things. And then I think that's also where the education side comes in, or introducing to students and to artists that there are these aspects of the music industry, that it's not just purely creating content, and that there are things like metadata to look at, marketing to do, tools that can help you along the way, different sources of income, whether it's streaming or Web3 or partnerships, what have you. And I think that is a good way to go around it, because I've also found that when I have done talks in different classes, and when sometimes professors want us to do an analysis on a student artist and see how they're doing and how the numbers can help them, and then if I throw like 5 recommendations at them of things to do next, it's overwhelming, because suddenly they think they have to do all of these things to progress to the next level in their career. But good content and good music, it goes a long way in the first place. And so I would focus on that. And then, if you have an inclination towards coding, or if that is something that you think you can combine, there are also a lot of artists who do both, especially like in electronic space, more inclined towards that area, and they can combine them. Then also maybe that's what makes you unique and helps you stand out. But I wouldn't say it's an absolute requirement for anyone creating music.
That makes a lot of sense. And I appreciate how in-depth all of you have gone today. When we come back with 5 recommendations, and Mike, I always joke that your book has 50 recommendations, and how do you juggle all of them at once? Is this an era where we really can try to play with our strengths and build where we're at? Or, Michelle and everybody else, are there specific recommendations that we should all take or encourage young people to take sooner rather than later that are sort of critical as first stage technical competencies or first stage direction?
It's a good one. I mean, I feel like a lot of it isn't even technical to begin with. It's mindset. Once you've got the mindset right, you can teach people all of the other things, but you can't teach, it's really impossible to try and teach someone how to think, how to act. That has to come naturally over time. But yeah, I mean, look, I'll be honest. One of my regrets is that I didn't learn coding at an earlier stage. And it doesn't mean that I necessarily need it in my day-to-day life right now, but I know that there's a bunch of other benefits that come with that. And to have that skill, I mean, you can apply that to so many things, wherever you end up in life. And the other thing that I just wanted to add is there's people that spend all of their years focusing on what they think is their specific job that they want in the music industry, only to find out that it's the complete opposite of what they actually want to do. And I always say, but don't worry, those skills still apply. You want to be an A&R and then you realize you don't. You can get into management. You can get into working with creators. You can get into a bunch of other things you can do there. So these skills are transferable. But as far as the essentials, I do think that coding, especially moving forward with all of the exciting things that have been mentioned just in this panel alone, it would be good to at least have a very basic understanding of that as well.
Well, I want to thank all of you. We are at time. The word potential was in the title of this talk, and all of you spoke to potential. It was exciting. It was affirming. And I'm seeing in the chat right now, and I think, Mike, you mentioned the word mindset. I'm seeing thanks to all of you for having already participated in other classes and other lectures with a lot of our attendees today. That speaks very positively to the community we're trying to build, which is sharing, connecting, collaborating. So Mike, Ulf, Baron, Michelle, thank you all for your time, and thank you all so much for your dedication to students and growth. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.